So another aspect of an argument that you can analyze are the fallacies utilized, and you can think about why an argument is unsuccessful versus thinking about why it was successful. And that entails analyzing the fallacies that the argument itself makes. So you had some reading to do from A Guide to Rhetoric, Genre, and Success in First Year Writing, chapter 6.5, which is Logical Fallacies, okay, which gives you a short list of possible fallacies. There are plenty more, but these are a pretty nice list for you to utilize. So when you're choosing your argument for your paper, you don't necessarily have to search for one that is totally 100% successful and argue why it is 100% successful. You can instead take an argument that you think is a poor argument and you can break down why it is unsuccessful. So some of the major ones, generalizations, conclusions or judgments made from insufficient evidence. Okay, so when a small piece of evidence or one piece of evidence is used to make a broad statement, I'm going to talk about that in the example that I show you in a little bit. Cherry picking, picking and choosing only some aspects of the available evidence in order to present like the most favorable, the ones that support what you're trying to say. You have the straw man, which is an oversimplification of an opposing perspective so that it becomes easy to attack. So this is when a writer is arguing and they're setting up this, other side, the other perspective, as if it's silly and easy to poke holes in, and doing that just so that they can build up their own argument. Red herring, changing topics to avoid the point being discussed. So this is a tactic in which one attempts to change the conversation, bringing up information that is not relevant to the argument, but makes it seem as if it's supporting the argument. Ad hominem is a very popular one, particularly in political ads, and it's a personal attack rather than a way of engaging with someone's ideas. So it attacks the person, their attributes, rather than the ideas that they are talking about. Ad populum is when you misuse or reference popular accepted values. So for an example that they provide here, this is about freedom and righteousness, and if you believe in those things, then you should believe my argument. Okay, so what are the values that they're referencing? Well, that's a really personal thing, so you have to understand your audience in order to believe that. But also, just because you are equating them to freedom and righteousness does not mean that your audience is also equating these things to freedom and righteousness. Either or is often another one. So you're presenting two different absolutes, saying that there is no gray area in between, and you're reducing a complex idea, a complex situation down to very simple terms, and then presenting them as if you are either here or there, right? The example they give, either we intervene or we are basically no better than Nazis, okay? Again, offering as if there's two choices and there's not more that we can think about. And slippery slope assumes that one thing is going to have a series of consequences or effects. And so again, this equating of one thing to another, of drawing lines between points, saying that, if A happens, then B and C will definitely happen, and just avoiding that there is a more complex situation at hand. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to watch a scene from Community, a show you can find on Netflix. The entire episode, season 1, episode 9, Debate 109, is centered around a debate that happens for a parking spot. But for our purposes, I'm just going to do a small analysis in case somebody wants to tackle the larger argument, which is riddled with fallacies. And it's actually would be a lot of fun to analyze why they are all incorrect. So let's start by watching the first debater.
And as German poet Franz Wickmeyer once wrote, "Snow falls from the heavens pure. We cannot blame the snow for being soiled by the earth." That is good.
Okay, so they are debating whether man is inherently good or inherently evil. But let's just break down his first rebuttal. So one of the first fallacies is his opening appeal to authority. Just because he's appealing to a wise person doesn't mean that the particular quote is smart or true or applicable. Okay, so he's attempting to appeal to ethos, but he is unsuccessful in doing it because he is making it seem as if this person is the smartest person on this topic, and he is not giving us, the audience, any context on how this fits in, what the poem in general is about, okay, and who and what this person's credentials are. It's also a false analogy because he's equating people to snow, which they're two totally different things, and they are too different to compare in an analogy, okay? Just because something has a similarity or a couple of similarities doesn't make an analogy between them true, applicable, or successful, and so it's false. He also attempts to appeal to pathos by becoming very emotional and crying, but just because he's crying doesn't make his point any more true, and it also doesn't make his point any more valid, okay? It's just instead putting on a display for emotional purposes. So let's watch Jeff's rebuttal.
What? That dude gets it.
Jeff Winger will now offer a 2-minute rebuttal.
Hey, Sizzle. What are you going to sing tonight? I'm in the mood for some Sade. Okay.
In the Stanford prison experiment, 21 out of 21 students, when given absolute power, abused and tortured their fellow students. My competitor likened people to pure falling snow. I would respond, there is none righteous. No, not one. Now, I realize Mr. Simmons' quote was from the great Franz Wickmeyer. Mine was just from a simple desert handyman named Jesus.
Okay, so what's going on in this response? Again, riddled with fallacies. So the very first one, the Stanford prison experiment, is an anecdotal example or a small sample. 21 students does not equal humanity, and that is too small of a sample size to make a sweeping statement such as man is inherently evil, okay? Also, the Stanford prison experiment was staged, and so this is false info at the get-go. So regardless of using it as an anecdotal example, it is also false information and should not be used to support a claim. Non sequitur also, there's a big leap between 21 students being evil and all of humanity being evil. Okay, so again, you cannot use this tiny, small sample size, and you also cannot make these huge, sweeping assumptions. Attempting to appeal to ethos in saying, this was a psychological experiment, okay? Appeal to the credibility of the source. Again, it was false. It was a staged experiment, and so the original experiment has no credibility. Therefore, his utilizing that as an appeal to ethos is also false. Then we have a quote from Jesus, which again is an attempt to appeal to ethos, okay? But we have this argument set up where he says, my opponent quoted Wickmeyer, I'm quoting Jesus, equating these two, right? Basically what he's saying is that because my quote is older and it comes from Jesus, it's better and more accurate, which does not make something better, and it does not make it more accurate because it is older and it comes from a particular source, right? So we also have the idea that it's rooted in religion, okay? Jesus is a product of Christianity. Not all of the audience might believe in Christianity. Therefore, they might not subscribe to the ethics, to the morals that he is trying to sell his argument on, okay? He's saying that his quote is better because it's Jesus and Jesus is a better authority, but that logically is not sound enough to make the argument. So again, you have the opportunity to look at a successful argument, an unsuccessful argument, whatever you want to do. If you want to write your paper on, something that's riddled with fallacies, more power to you. But if you want to focus on something successful and think about what appeals they make and why they are successful, go for it.